Aloha and welcome to this quick screencast on how to set up the Bootstrap bookmarks bar. So what I want you to see is here it is right here. I've made one for myself. It's super useful. You're all going to love having one of these. The idea here is that I can go through each of these subfolders and get quickly to any of the particular sections of the Bootstrap documentation that I want to. So if I want to see something about, say, tables in Bootstrap, I can click here and I go right to this section that is of interest to me. Okay, so this is way faster than Googling on Bootstrap, and you might get to other, 2.3.2 documentation, or even going to the front page and then having to click here and then having to go down here and say, oh, I want to see about this. Okay, that's all, humbug. If you want to be able to develop fast, you want to establish set of links that get you where you need to be very quickly. Okay, so like if you want to find out about labels, here we are. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, it's really simple. You can see that each of these sections, we're going to concentrate on these three parts, these three pages of the Bootstrap documentation. Getting started, you should read that, okay, but you don't need to really bookmark it, because once you've kind of read it and kind of understand how to get started, you won't need that anymore. The key parts of the documentation are these, the documentation of the CSS, the components, and the JavaScript. So that's what we're going to set up. Customize is interesting, but not something on your in your daily life you're going to do. Okay, so how are we going to do this? I'm going to show you how you might set up something like this in the Chrome browser, and you do that by going to the bookmark manager, and then in the bookmarks bar you click on organize. I'm going to add a folder. I'll call this Bootstrap 2, okay, because I've already got mine, but I'm going to set up, kind of show you how I'd start setting up a new one. So now I've got this Bootstrap 2, and you can see that it actually immediately appears here. So then I'll click on that, click on this, and then I'm going to add a folder underneath it called CSS. Okay, so now we can see under Bootstrap 2 I've got CSS, but I've got nothing in it. So now what we want to start doing is adding pages to this particular page. So we'll click the Add Page. Having selected the CSS, I'm going to click the Add Page, and then I'm going to go back to Bootstrap, go into CSS, and find my first section, the Overview section. Okay, and when I click on it, I'm going to get one of these internal links to that page, which I'll copy, and then I'll go here and I'll type Overview, and then I'll put the URL in. Okay, and if I tab out, now I've got this overview link. Okay, and now go through and read it. Okay, so part of this is to establish it, is to give you kind of a way to go through all of the documentation. It's probably going to take you maybe 30-45 minutes to read through all these sections, but it's really useful to read through and kind of get a sense for what each of these sections has in it. A, because it's really well written, it's a good documentation, but B, since Bootstrap 3 is brand new, all of these other tutorials on the web are really not going to be that helpful to you right now. There's very few Bootstrap 3, user-generated stuff, apart from the stuff that I'm creating for you. This is really good documentation. You should read it. Just read through the whole thing. Okay, so here's the overview section. I've read it a few times, but I would just read through it, okay? And then, and you can see kind of as we move through it, the links are changing. Finally, we get to the next section, which is the grid section. Okay, so I click on this, I do copy, I go over to my bookmark manager, I say organize, add page, grids, or grid I think it's called, tab out of there, and now I've got the grid section, and then I go back in here and I continue to read about grids. Grids are very interesting actually, so you'll spend a fair amount of time kind of looking at this. And this is actually kind of interesting because you'll find that this is responsive. So the grids actually change, the example of the grids actually change as you resize your screen. And so on and so forth. Now it's going to turn out, as you do this, there's a lot of sections. There's probably 10 sections in the CSS, probably 24 sections in the components, another dozen sections in JavaScript. It's going to take you a while. Okay, so just relax. Give yourself a couple hours to do this. Take your time. And read the documentation. The only way, you're going to have to reread it in the future, and you'll learn as you do it, but there's nothing that takes the place of simply sitting down and trying to understand what the framework is about. Okay? So that's how I do it. Now there's two other sections here that I recommend you, that I want you to build also. The Bootstrap example intro section, okay, is a repository that I've created on GitHub. We'll talk more about GitHub in the future, and it's got a bunch of different branches here, boot swatch, theses, are us, sign in, etc. That it shows some example systems that I've developed to help you learn how to use Bootstrap. So if you can go to the sign in branch, and there's this little simple web page that has a sign in area inside it, or sign in form in it. And so I think it's good to create a bookmark for each of these. So let's go ahead and make one for in the Bootstrap example, add page, sign in, put the URL. Okay, now we've got two, and that you need four actually. So we could go back here. For these, it's you can read it, but I've got actually other exercises that you can use to learn more about it. So it's not as important that you really kind of focus on this code right now. So I'm going to put theses are us, okay, and so on and so forth. The final section of this is a MISC section where I want you to put at least 2 links to interesting sites that you feel would be useful to you. I find the colors, the predefined colors, to be something I'm always wondering about when I'm mocking things up. Another excellent site you could put in here is the CSS cheat sheet, because the syntax of CSS is something I'm always wondering about as well. Okay, so that's the overview of how you're going to create your bookmark documentation for building systems with Bootstrap. I hope you like it.